Thanks, Premnath, for being a part of this.
Thank you.
I think many of the aspects of funding social innovation have been covered in various ways during the day-to-day. We also had, innovators and entrepreneurs who came and kind of put an ask out. We need X lakhs, X crores to generate a particular impact. Now, I want to start with some basic nomenclatures first. When we are talking about investors, we are talking about financial investors who are investing in kind of equity or quasi-equity, right? So can you expand on that a little bit to tell us something more along these lines as to how do you define different types of money sources and where does the investor, the financial investor, come into the play?
Yeah, sorry, I know time is short, but I need to take a step back. So I just wanted to go with some basics first, and then we can build on it, right? So when we are talking about innovation, to me, what it means is essentially solving problems in a new way, right? Plus implementing it, right? There's an element of implementation as well, which we should not forget. When you talk about social innovation, right, what are we trying to talk about over there? What is that additional aspect that we are bringing to the table, right? So we refer to social innovation when that innovation also has a potential for considerable social impact, right? Sure. And social impact can be in many different forms. One of them being that it is inclusive, right? But that's one variety in my opinion. It could be many other ways of looking at what constitutes social innovation. You may be solving a problem which is environment related and so on and so forth. Why do you need to have a separate class? We need to think about that as well. I told you that innovation is about implementation as well. So there have to be vehicles to implement it, right? Mm-hmm. And those vehicles to implement it could be, say, for example, a not-for-profit, right? Could be a for-profit, or could be, say, for example, even the government implementing a social innovation project, right? Now, the typical innovator has this challenge of how they are going to implement it. How are they going to execute a particular project? And how is it going to see the scale that they aspire for? Everybody wants to have impact. I have a comment on scale later, but we want to have that impact, right? So you would look at different ways of implementing it, each of these methods, depending upon what your anticipation is on how it could be financed, right? Mm-hmm. How is it that that vehicle is going to be financed, and how is it going to reach its full potential? Now, when we look at it from a social innovator's perspective, there are two large categories. One, that there is an opportunity for revenue, mm-hmm. and another where there isn't. If there isn't any opportunity for revenue, you will have to fund it through charities and grants and so on and so forth, and you will invariably be a not-for-profit, right? If there is an opportunity for revenue, you have the option of being a not-for-profit or for-profit as well, right? And there are different reasons one might choose to do that. The question is, during the life of an enterprise or an organization, how is funding arranged? And by the way, I'm telling you during the course, because that's also a very important aspect of thinking through financing an organization. There are many situations where right up front you can see how revenue will accrue. But there are many other situations where it takes time to even figure that out. Okay, there are situations where there's a considerable time period to investment in the beginning. There's a time to market. There's a time to even figure out the product market fit. Good. And many businesses where the activation barrier, I mean, Dr. Michelker is here, so I have to do some chemical engineering here as well. So where the barrier is pretty large.
Yes.
And you need to cross that barrier. And many investors at the beginning do not see necessarily that that the visibility of how they could make money on it is not really visible in the very beginning. So typically, my observations are that if you have decided that the revenue potential is not very large and investors will not be interested, you will probably take the not-for-profit route even if you have revenue potential. If you have a situation where the revenue potential you think is going to be very large right from day one, you would do a for-profit and go to investors straight away, right? If you have a situation where the revenue potential is, according to you, large, but nobody else believes you, and they want to see the results first, then you would start with a for-profit, but you would first tap grants, funding of soft nature,
Sure.
to get it to a point where you cross over and then do it.
Right.
So impact investors, in my opinion, are very often those who, of course, many of the professional investors do have that the financial returns in mind, and invariably for all of them, the first, if it's a multiple bottom line company, the first bottom line is always money. And I don't want to give any wrong impressions to any social innovator out here. If you cannot show the money, I don't think any impact investor will be interested. But they have a second bottom line, right? And that second bottom line either ensures that there is money allocated for that theme, and they want to do focused investment in that theme, or in some cases they are willing to forego a little bit of return expectations or timelines, over which they want to recover that funds. So they may be a little more patient depending upon how they're structured and so on and so forth, right? So impact investments, by the way, is a very important category, no doubt about it, because at least they are committed to the topic or the theme or the impact area that the social innovator is interested in, and people have to find those people who are really interested in that theme. But they should not live under the impression that the first bottom line is anything else other than money. Right? So that's something which you should keep in mind.
Absolutely. And when you look at it as a financial or risk investor, right? I mean, that's basically the category that we're talking about, because so many other categories have been covered during our conversations, and I think the topic today is focused on that. Now, when we talk about it in a business sense, right? You look at the parameters of how you would go about choosing a potential investment, and you look at, things like team, the problem you're trying to solve, how scalability it can gain, and finally, any investor looks at what is the exit path. In case of social enterprises, and I'm saying social enterprises that want to attract risk capital, can you kind of dwell a little bit into how these kind of things play out?
Yeah. So I think whether it's a commercial investment or an impact investment, typically the first and most important thing is just the problem itself and the need and how impactful you could be, right? That, I think, always comes first. And as you're aware very well, the top reasons why startups fail is actually that there's no need for the offering that the company is
Product
making.
market fit.
Right? So that becomes always the first case, right? Beyond that, I think the next big thing is the team, right? And people generally believe at the early stages of organizations that if there is a really important challenge in front which everybody is interested in solving, and there's a team behind it, whether the first solution works or not, they will figure out the solutions, okay? And they'll continuously innovate and come up with new solutions. So I think sometimes many of our entrepreneurs tend to overemphasize solutions that they have at hand, but actually probably the more important thing is to focus on the problem and defining it well, and then looking at whether you have the team in place or not. Clearly, when you seek out different investors, they are team members, they are partners in your journey, right? And everybody wants to see a return of some kind, right? The government too wants to see a return, by the way, right? They want to be able to talk about all the achievements that you have done in the things they were supposed to do and which they've offloaded to you, right? So everybody wants a return. So the question is, how do you get that return, understand that return aspiration and sort of fit into it, right? CSR partners do the same. Impact investors also have a similar kind of a goal. In impact investors, there are two large categories of results that they need to show, right? One is, of course, the financial returns, because typically many of them are structured as venture capital funds, and they have a fixed period of time in which they have to show a return, and that return, there will be a benchmark for it, and then on the other side, they need to show impact which they have promised in those areas which the investors have required them to do. So just to give you a little bit of sense, just imagine, where sometimes social innovators don't understand that there are many companies who are purely commercial who also have a lot of impact, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So for example, if you were looking at, say, Serum Institute, right, a very highly profitable company, I think you can say that their impact is considerable and very large, right? You hear their the commercial story. Similarly, there are others which are already listed on the stock market. So in principle, an investor need not necessarily see a difference between investing in that entity in the stock market versus, say, your entity, which is small, right? Unless you communicate a vision of impact which is very significant and very large or unique. There's one category I just want to point out where we should be a little careful about, where the impact, so I look at impact in, three ways. One is, of course, the financial impact. Second is the scale of, what kind of impact you're having. But there's one other aspect which you need to keep in mind, which has got to do with intensity of the impact, right? For example, if we are working with hemophilia patients, right, you might be saving lives, but the population is very small, right? How do we, with all our humanity, want to think about it? And I actually would like even our CSR partners to think about it, because if you also start talking only about scale, right, then you will definitely not look at these kind of categories. So in those categories, we as a society need to build pockets of funding. In the US, there are some special interest group kind of funding agencies which come up around certain themes, right? In India, I don't see too many of those yet, but it's very important to build those, because otherwise we will be only chasing either the highest in financial returns or perhaps the highest in social returns, but then perhaps a combination of the two. I know our resources are limited, but we still need to focus on these as well. Otherwise, I feel it hurts our humanity.
So as Venture Center, Prem, you've been doing investing, and by definition, some of the investments that you have done are really long-term bets of some sort, right? So when you look at it, because now you are donning the hat of a financial investor, when you are now putting your money into those startups that are, in biotech primarily, but it could be anything else in the impact space, right? When you look at these, what are your expectations of a financial return from it? What is the time frame that you have in mind? If you can just elaborate on that.
Yeah. So first of all, we are an incubator, right? We happen to run seed funds, but our focus is primarily on incubation. We are also sector agnostic. We look at those ideas which have some depth in terms of innovation intensity and knowledge intensity, but it can be across sectors. We do have impact investments in a lot of other sectors other than health, including agriculture, environment, energy, and so on and so forth. So there are other domains where we have also done those investments. the reason I mentioned an incubator is because our orientation and the kind of funds we have access to are different from, say, what a venture capital fund typically does, who have limited time periods in which they need to seek exits and return money to their investors. We don't have the same pressures. But that said, for us, the motivation when we invest is to look at returns which we can put back into many other social innovators and entrepreneurs who are in the queue, right? So for us, it's the velocity of the turnover that's more important than necessarily the scale of the return. But that said, there are many domains where to have an impact, you need to give it time, right? So, for example, all regulated sectors, you know that you cannot make any money until you have crossed over the regulations, right? So, it's unfair. I mean, if we were to not ignore those sectors, then what will happen is that you will have a problem. Like in COVID, we may not have had options if we did not have any of those at hand, right? We can be the richest economy in the world and not have the basic, technology offerings available for basic services and products, right? So that is something which we always keep in mind. So we do look, besides the potential for impact, not necessarily in scale, but also in terms of niche areas where intensity is important. For example, saving a life has a different value than, say, where you're able to, say, improve the life a little bit, right, for many people. How would you value the two? You need to think about that. Besides that, we also look at strategic gains. For example, there are certain areas where you will not have a player in the game if you don't invest today, right? And you need to be in the game, say 5, 6, 7 years from now. And if we don't do that, we are basically excluding out a whole area of work, and we see that as one of our roles as well. So as Venture Center, we tend to take those lines, but I can tell you that our follow-on investors have very great clarity on returns, right? So for them, financial returns are extremely important. So one of our jobs as an incubator is basically getting startups ready for a commercial investor of some kind or an impact investor of some kind. So that is a key thing that we look for. And we often fund also to cross over the activation barriers so that the next step, the journey for the commercial investors or the impact investors is very clear in terms of, or not uncertain, so to say, in the path ahead.
So you're taking those initial, risks, so to say, to prepare the entrepreneur, create the thesis, so that the impact investor who's really looking at a financial return can come in at appropriate stage.
Exactly, and I think that's the job of any of the government sources that support us. That's the job of any of the CSR and other public support that we get, because we create basically a pipeline for, the future, and many other people to contribute. Yes. See, if we did not, well, I don't want to sound too cocky, but if organizations like us and other incubators did not create the pipeline, right, people would be happy investing in gold.
Yes.
Right? So we have to create that opportunity for investing in innovation, and that's what I think we should be doing.
I think you're right. I mean, and not just the gold part. I mean, I agree with you from other point of view that I think your kind of a investment strategy also creates a validation of sorts. So as you know, we have taken on some follow-on rounds based on the fact that Venture Center is there, it's money. This discussion can go on for a while, but we have limitation of time. So I'd like to take a question or two, if there is one, from a risk investment into social enterprises point of perspective. Yes. Yeah, you can shout out. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
We'll try and repeat the question. Go ahead.
So, my question is, how small can be the amount of impact investing? The reason I ask is
Work on what?
Rivers, yeah.
Rivers.
issues related to rivers. For instance, using a water hyacinth for some kind of product and
Yeah.
cleaning up the river. If they require a very small amount, would you be interested in these kind of projects?
Yeah.
How do you look at
Yeah. So I think the question was what should be the size of the, if the kitty is small, would investors be interested? So by the way, the way we look at it is that in the early stages, when you're talking about from an idea to a proof of concept to, let's say, what we call it as proof of value, right? You often need to fund it through various soft sources, right? So there could be a variety of grants, there could be a variety of, so it could be government, CSR, and so on. And many of our CSR partners have actually supported that as long as there's social impact as well. We have, for example, Cummins here or Kemin in the audience. We have others who have been supporting Venture Center and the startups to look at that early stage and fill up those gaps, right? The moment you are in a position where the pathway looks fairly clear, you've ironed out some of the uncertainties, you know that there is a business model around it, that's when you're ready to raise money from investors. Now the investors will have their own, they come at different levels of what's called ticket sizes, right? There will be some who will come with smaller amounts, there will be some who will come up with larger amounts. You need to understand who funds at what level and cater and work with them at that stage and then move on to the next level. The larger, you have to understand that for investors, they also look at, for them, whether they are reviewing a small proposal or a big proposal, it might involve the same level of cost, right? So you have to understand their sensibilities and thinking mindset and accordingly position it. Yeah, so we do have things. We even have something in water hyacinth. So happy to talk to people who who are working on such themes.
Yes.
I am B.H. Shrikant, industrial consultant, Pune. Okay, very varied issue that has been raised by that lady. I would like to add up some valuable information to it. Hitherto, water hyacinth was worrying waste. Okay, that was costly affair to collect it and dispose it off. Now, this waste to wealth, that very nice technology has been developed by Regional Research Laboratory, Jorhat, Assam. Based on this water hyacinth, they have developed this technology to generate biogas plant. Okay, this is new technology, very, very nice technological development they have made. This additional information to this waste has become now wealth.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and so this actually will spawn a lot of opportunities for startups and businesses now to use the technology, license it in some way, and build fairly viable businesses, which then can be, investable from a financial investment or risk investment perspective, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for that insight.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one last point there. How do you get in touch with Mr. Premnath?
Venturecenter.co.in.
Just ask.
That's the website of Venture Center, and my address is just director@venturecenter.co.in.
So there was a saying that in olden days, when somebody wanted to know which is the address, what is the address of Lokmanya Tilak in Pune, the postcard will say Lokmanya Tilak Pune. So you can say Dr. Premnath Pune and you will find, you will get there. Thank you very much. Should we close the session?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Sorry it's been a short session, but we had to close up.
Thank you.